Welcome, everybody. I'm Scott Paton, your host, the Dean of Blogonomics and Podology, and this is Internet Marketing Unleashed. And I'm very excited today because I have a wonderful, wonderful guest to introduce you to. She is an international speaker, a podcast host, and podcast producer. And I guess it's well over 10 years, maybe she knows years better than me, that she started a meetup in just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia for podcasters. And I was happy to be invited to speak a couple times and then, of course, join the meetup and meet a bunch of wonderful podcasters. So she was able to start creating a really nice group in Vancouver in the early days of podcasting. So she's a real go-getter. She was voted number 16 of the top 50 moms in podcasting by Podcast Magazine. She's the founder of Amplify You. She and her team have launched and managed over 137 podcasts in the last 18 months. If that doesn't tell you podcasting is hot, I don't know what will. And she manages over 55 shows a week, which is pretty amazing. And one of the things that really makes me excited, because as you know, I'm a digital nomad. I'm in Medellin, Colombia during the pandemic and the closing of the world. But I love to travel, and she loves to travel too. And she travels a different way than I do. She's the co-founder of the Canadian, I got a little ahead of myself there. She doesn't just speak about a freedom lifestyle. She lives off the grid on the boat access side of a lake and drives her kids to school, to the school bus by boat while running 100% online business. And she's been mentoring and sharing her passion for podcasters since 2012. I was going to say she runs around the country in an RV, so she'll have to tell me if I got that right or if I got it mixed up with somebody else. But I'm pretty sure the last time we talked, which was a few years ago, she was in an RV running around, and I was insanely jealous because it just sounds like such a fun way to travel. And I have aunts and uncles that had RVs, but my parents never got one, so I'm kind of scared of driving those big things. I think I'm going to hit a building. But we're going to be talking about podcasting, traveling, and a whole bunch more things. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below or to the side, wherever the comments are and whatever it is you're looking. We're live right now. We'd love to answer those questions. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, hit the bell button. And make sure that you don't miss an exciting episode. We're going to be sharing some amazing, actionable information for you today, as we try to all the time. So with that, welcome to the show, Michelle Abraham. How are you? Oh, hang on.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to talk to you today. It's been a few years, and I think the last time we saw each other, we were somewhere in Asia.
Yeah,
so
that's
super
right.
great to see you.
We were in the Philippines, I think, and wandering around Southeast Asia. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I think on that trip together, we did Philippines, Singapore, and Malaysia. So that was really cool. And then I had to leave you guys to get home to my babies. My husband had 3 weeks with them all by himself. And you guys got to go to Thailand and Bali, and I was very jealous.
He's a superstar to spend that much time on his own, because I think parenting is fair if there's one parent, one child. If there's one parent and more than one child, it's not fair for whatever parent it is.
Get a little outnumbered. It's a little bit tricky.
Right. And I think, too, when we were talking a while back, you were in an RV. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
tell us a little bit
right.
about that, because that was very exciting.
Yeah, it was really exciting. We were in an RV for about 5.5 months. And So we went from Vancouver with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old in tow. We bought a 33-foot bus. And actually, the really cool thing that I think your audience is going to love about this story, I mean, it's cool to be in the RV and all, but how we funded the RV trip was that I did a virtual summit on RVing. And I decided that I wanted to interview people who were living full-time in their RV, traveling around the world, having fun doing it, or traveling around the US doing it, having fun. And I interviewed 25 experts in the RV space. And it was really exciting because I got to know these 25 people. And while I was interviewing them for the summit, I thought, well, why not do a podcast interview with them as well? So super exciting. We had a podcast at the end of the interviews. We had a podcast interview with 25 people and a summit interview with 25 people. And I was able to sell the recordings of the summit. And that's how we actually bought our RV and funded our 5-month trip. So while I was on the trip, we were editing podcasts and doing podcasting production. And it was just a really cool way to get started and have a really cool story about podcasting and RVing.
That is awesome.
You never thought those two would go together.
No. And I've been in network marketing for over 20 years. You've been in it for a long time as well. Mm-hmm. And I think we don't realize that what we know is just in this small area of network marketing, right? And who would have thought doing a summit for RVs? And of course, there'd be thousands and thousands of people that would be just like, yeah, it's my dream to RV, or I want to know more about RVing and do it better. And everything else. So any industry that you're in, think for a second, like, are there a lot of people that are bringing groups of trainers or experts in your industry together? And if there aren't, then you should talk to Michelle here about putting on a summit, because I think that's an awesome idea. And you're right. Like, there's a lot of people in a lot of industries where, there may be, like, real estates, realtors, they have conferences all the time. But if you're in something, particularly something fun, because everyone's been so cooped up, then get a bunch of people together, show people how to do it better, to do whatever the hobby is or the activity is better, and you'll be shocked at how many people want to participate.
Yeah, and Scott, if I can just pull back the layers a little bit further on this whole, it was kind of an experiment. I had never done a summit before, and I kind of wanted to see. So what I did is, it was an industry I knew nobody in. I had no connections in the industry. Personally, I wanted to go RVing, but I'd never been in an RV in my life. And so we thought, well, this is kind of a cool experiment. So I want to learn about RVing. So why don't I record it while we're learning about it? And then the cool thing is that after that, I became, in a relationship with 25 people who are experts in that space. So I spoke at 3 or 4 different conferences for RVing while I was on our road trip for 5 months there. We, just to give you an idea, we stayed with a group of people called the Full-Time Families, and we went to one of their rallies. To just give you an idea, there's over 200 families at this rally in California. And the Facebook group for the Full-Time Families is over 50,000 people in it. So wow. This is a big, it was a lot bigger industry space, like people that were interested in this kind of information than I originally thought. So it was really a cool way to come into a new industry without a list, without any connections, make money from it, and then enjoy that money as a family doing our trip.
Right. And I think the other thing too is you had a vision and a goal. I want to spend, and it turned out to be 5 or 6 months in running around the country. Did you go to the United States as well?
We went from Vancouver all the way to California. Then we spent most of the 5 months, California, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon. We spent a lot of time in California, actually. Obviously, it was over the winter.
I love that trip. I've gone down, not in an RV, but I've driven from Vancouver down to San Diego, and then across to, not as far as Phoenix, Las Vegas, Grand Canyon area, up through Utah. I kind of call it a circle route.
We kept doing the circle because we liked it so much.
I know.
We kept going Southern California, then up through Arizona, and then we came up through the Grand Canyon on New Year's morning. So what a majestic place to be on New Year's morning. It was really neat.
And what memories for your children too.
Yeah, they still talk about it. I mean, this was 3 years ago now, but they still talk about it on a weekly basis of something about the RV, or the RV comes up and we still have it sitting in the driveway. Oh,
I can't wait to hear about your next trip. I hear Vermont and that area in the fall is absolutely spectacular.
Yeah. I'd like to go to the East Coast. We're going to have to upgrade our RV before we can do that because we were on a budget.
No problem.
Yeah, exactly. I am. And I have to thank you, Scott, because of that. The meetup group that I started in Vancouver all those years ago, bringing you in as a guest speaker, I learned so much from you about podcasting, about internet marketing, about just getting started and doing things. And, look where it's just picking up on something that you think is going to be popular. I mean, you were involved in podcasting so much longer before I was, and you are still involved in it now. And it's interesting how, we kind of saw this in 2012 or 2013 when we were doing these meetup groups. Nobody was knowing what the heck we were talking about, really.
So in other words, you're telling me I did a very bad job of being the caller for podcasts.
Oh, what I'm saying is you're introducing so many people to it. At the time, they had no idea what this thing was. And here they are now, like many years later, a lot of them still podcasting. And it's really neat to see just how quickly podcasting now in the last 7 or 8 years has just gone like over 1 million podcasts now. But, I'd love to put it into perspective for people, though. But there's been more blog posts written in the last 3 days than there are podcasts in total. So it's still perspective wise, there's still lots of room in the podcasting space. Yeah.
And so let me ask you about that. Do you think that is because people think it's easier just to get and type up, 300 words or 500 words, or also the number one fear is not death, it's public speaking, and that stops a lot of people from podcasting?
Yeah, I think that's true. It is a lot easier to just write a blog post. I also think that for the podcasters that are out there, I think they're recognizing the importance of the SEO, the written part. So having your show notes also published as a blog post is also going to help you come a long way now that Google's indexing podcast episodes on an individual basis too. And, voice recognition is on its way. So I think having that footprint there in the written right now for the search engine purposes strictly, I think is really smart.
Yeah. And to be honest, with all my podcasting clients, automatically we do a blog post. We embed it in the blog post. You can listen to it, you can read it, and it's definitely the way to go.
Yeah. So you have to do show notes anyway, so you might as well just publish it onto your blog post.
Right.
And make it look nice and then, really use that SEO to help your show get more found. Right.
So the part of your introduction that I missed, because I jumped to the RV part because I was so excited about that, was you've co-founded the Canadian Podcast Network and My Podcast Coach, and you're the creator of the Portable Podcaster Formula. So tell us a little bit about all three.
Yeah, sure. So the Canadian Podcast Network, I co-founded it with a radio veteran. His name's Alan, and it's really cool. His background is 35 years in the radio industry, and together we've come kind of bridging together radio and podcasting to really. What we noticed was that Canadian podcasters are really underrepresented in the podcasting space. There's not a lot of Canadian podcasters out there. There should be a lot more. I mean, even in our 130 something shows that we've launched in the last little while, I would say probably only 30 or 40 of them are Canadian. And so what we wanted to do is get together the Canadian podcasters. There's a few other podcasting groups across Canada, but come together as a national kind of voice so that we can kind of share stories and share experiences, have some networking events, showcase our podcasters on. We're just about to launch the Canadian Podcast Network podcast, where each of our shows that are members are going to be featured on a weekly show. So just more exposure for Canadian podcasters. That's the real reason behind that whole adventure.
Cool. And one of the there's an interesting Canadian aspect to the podcasting story, because the CBC was one of the only radio networks, we'll say, in the world that had it had something to do with the rights that you could actually podcast it. Everyone else, you couldn't take, like if ABC did something, they couldn't actually take it and put it on a podcast. I don't know why, but it had to do with music, and it had to do with all sorts of stuff, because the licensing was, I guess it was the music. The licensing was there were no podcasting when they made the agreements. So when podcasting came up, they didn't have an agreement to do it, so they couldn't do it. So Apple had a real problem when they were creating their first directory because there was no content for it, right? And so they worked really, really closely with CBC, and all of the CBC shows ended up being turned into podcasts really quickly. And I remember in like 2007 or 10 or whenever it was that I was looking at this, that the CBC podcast, they had a whole section, and it was just amazing. Like you could just click on all these different shows. There was hundreds of them. And then each show had hundreds of episodes that people could listen to. And so that content really helped take podcasting to a level where it had enough mass that it would attract enough of an audience to make it worthwhile for Apple to put the resources into it. So it was really amazing.
Yeah, it's funny. I was sitting next to a lady on a plane who was a CBC podcast host, and so and we just happened to sit next to each other. It was really interesting how she was talking about how CBC was like so much more in the forefront of the Canadian podcast, like way before anyone else even recognized what that was going to do. And it's interesting because right now we're struggling a little bit with the radio guys who have these amazing shows that are 2-3 hours long of jazz or, whatever. They come in, they do some talking. So it's like a podcast. It's just got some music in it too. We're struggling with the licensing a little bit and to be able to play them wherever. So they have had to buy their own licenses to stream on a particular platform, and then we can play it on our website. So it's interesting. Just the licensing around the music piece is a little bit tricky. I know for our regular podcast, we have to purchase a license, and we purchase those licenses, but for a music show that has 15, 20 shows in it, that's quite a lot of licenses to have to buy.
That is, yeah. It's an interesting problem. Hopefully your podcast network can kind of come together and maybe with some licensing lawyers and come up with something that makes it easier for podcasters to use the music, because it's great exposure, right? Like there's a lot of musicians that advertise their music on YouTube, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to go listen to, I don't know, Michael Jackson, and there's a commercial and it's some other artist, and I can listen to 5 seconds or I guess 30 seconds of the music before the ad ends. And you would think that they would be happy if you gave credit, of course, for the music to people to have it. And it's not podcasting, but I was listening to a talk, let's call it a talk show. That's the easiest way to put it. And he had a section where he had no talking, but just these words coming down and the music. And it was a famous song done by a very unfamous person. And I loved it. So of course, at the end or in the description, I'm like, where is this? It's a great version of this song. I want to listen to it more. And I ended up subscribing to the artist's channel so I can listen to their music as it comes out. So I think that the artists have to pull their head out of a certain part of their anatomy, and their lawyers and the music industry, and say, listen, things have changed. We want to get exposure for our music, and let's not make it so hard. I'm not saying it should necessarily be free, but it certainly should be, if you're playing it, because podcasts are forever. You'll never read the blog post 10 years from now that someone wrote today, but people will be listening to you if you podcast today 10 years from now, because that's happened to all my old podcasts. They still.
Yeah, I have to use you as an example of your weight loss podcast. You still had people 10 years later sending you emails about how amazing it was. And I have to use that as an example. Guys, this stuff does not go away. So make sure it's good that you're putting it up there.
I did a podcast on eBay with a fella named Tim Knox out of Huntsville, Alabama. It had to be 2007, 2008, 2009. And I was just talking to him not even a month ago. And he's gotten totally out of eBay and everything. Hasn't been involved for 10 years or 8 years. And he says, I'm still getting emails about, questions about eBay from that podcast, Scott. And we just laugh and laugh and laugh. And so this is something that generates leads you do it once and it generates leads forever. And I tell people to do a newsletter, and after someone reads it, they hit delete. They're never going to read it again. And that's why this is such an important medium.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the things that we're, chatting with our podcasters about is, you remember back in the day where you went and had backlinks from your website to all these different places? Well, it's kind of like that in podcasting now, where when you go and be an interview on someone else's show, you're kind of creating those backlinks back to your own show, back to your own stuff. But those interviews are going to be there forever. So those are way more valuable than being on, a summit or being on any sort of webinar or anything that's going to go away. These things are not going anywhere unless people pod fade out. But when they pod fades, oftentimes their show still is there. So.
Yeah. And everybody's got it on their phone. That's the other thing, right? Like you've got it with you. So you could be driving, you could be going for a walk, you could be just waiting at the doctor's office and plug in your earset and someone could be listening to you because it's so mobile. I mean, I remember being so excited because the iPod had come out and this meant that everything that I was doing and everyone was doing it on a computer, and the computers were big, right? You had the box, you had the monitor, you had the keyboards, and you couldn't take it to the beach. Now we can take our little phones to the beach and you can be talking to people who are sitting in Mexico, in a Cancun on the beach, or in the gym. It's just amazing, the technology.
Yeah, I think how I got interested in podcasting was around the time that I started that meetup group, because I was a new mom and I'd been in like business, had a fitness studio in 8 locations across BC, and I was used to like marketing and business, and then I became a mom and I was like, yeah, I love being a mom, but my business brain is like done. So I remember sitting there playing with my new baby, and I looked on the Apple. I saw this Apple thing on the TV, and I was like, "What's that?" So I clicked on it, and I started listening to some shows on there. Oh, this is better. And then I realized I could take it for my son for a walk and put my earbuds in. And then I got into my new truck, and there's an Apple button there. I was like, "What the heck? This is my car too." So yeah, I was like really excited to like be able to. That's kind of when I knew this is not going anywhere, because if they're putting it into new cars, they're investing a lot of money in doing that. Apple TV is not going anywhere. So that's kind of what started me getting excited. And I think actually really it stopped me from going down maybe postpartum depression route, where a lot of moms do, because you're a career person, and then all of a sudden you're at home and goo goo gaga, and your brain is just like flop. So collects a lot of dust bunnies in there when you become a new mom.
That's a great point, and you're contributing, you maybe have changed careers, right? Or businesses, however you want to put it that way, in terms of, but you're doing something and you're able to do it at home, you're able to do it on your own time with your own schedule. And I know if you're recording somebody, like I have the same time every week that I do my recordings. So those they're less flexible. I mean, but I try not to change them as much as I can, but then around that, you can do whatever you want to do. So I think that's really important. So we've had this whole like world shutdown pandemic thing going on since, well, like 6 or 7 or 8 months now. Has that affected your business?
It has, Scott, but in a really positive way. So while the whole world's been shut down, people are really starting to think, how am I going to communicate with my customers now that I can't see them in person? So podcasting is, for us, as we've been hit the ground running. I got off a plane March 12th from a conference in San Diego, the New Media Summit, actually, where there was a lot of podcasters there. And luckily we had no COVID there, 200 people in a room and no COVID. So that was excellent. And then we just started running once we got back to Canada, and we haven't stopped since then. Right now we have 21 shows in pre-production. We have had, just to give you an idea of the kinds of shows right now, I mean, we specifically only work with entrepreneurs who have a big heart and a huge mission out there to make an impact in the world. And so we have, someone that works as a high commissioner in the UN right now, creating a show on cultural diversity. We have a celebrity right now creating a show with us. We have a former NFL player creating a show with us. We have a high-tech 5G company creating a show with their scientists so that they can talk to their customers. So all sorts of different kinds of avenues, different kinds of people. We have our everyday entrepreneurs that are out there, spiritual entrepreneurs. It's just so many different kinds of people.
Nice.
People who've been laid off that now need to start a new career. Lots of different kinds of shows, lots of different kinds of people out there, but they all have that one thing in common, is that they're out there trying to do something really impactful in the world. So for us, it's kind of helped us keep in that positive mind space, working with these people that just want to get their message out there to change some lives.
That's awesome. And so there's a couple lessons from what you've just said. Number one is you have a vision, you have an ideal client in mind who you want, and those are who you work for. So if someone doesn't fit that model, the chances are you're not going to be working with them. You may find someone else, you may help them find someone else that will do the work. But it makes a huge difference when you're dealing with the people that you love versus the people that maybe are just like nails on a chalkboard to us.
Just a paycheck for you. Yeah.
Paycheck for you. The other thing was that you had a vision, and it started when you became a mom and you wanted to do something. You didn't want to leave your whole past life totally behind. You needed to transform it, and you discovered that you could do work at home, and so you've created that business at home. And it could have been a lot smaller. Like, you could have put a lid on it and just said, you know what, I only want to spend a couple hours a day doing this sort of thing. So you can decide how big it wants to be, because my babies are babies and everything else. And when they get older, I'll decide if I want to change that or I want to continue to do it. But the point is that you had built the foundation. So then when the world collapsed, your foundation was solid. And because it's the same thing for me, like my business has exploded since coronavirus hit, you know? And so I can just imagine, you know, the same thing for you. So if you're listening to this and you have a job as a reheat fooder at McDonald's, stop watching Netflix, find things that you really love doing, and then see how you can leverage that into a business on the side that will give you the type of life that you want. And I guess where you have to start with is, what type of life do you want, right? Yeah. Like when you went on the RV, you was like, honey, we want to go RVing for a while. I don't know how long. And then it was like, but once you set that direction, because it was RVing, it wasn't, you know, boating, for example, at that time. Now you're on a boat, right?
We have to drive a boat to get to our house. Yeah. So we're on a boat a couple times a day to and from our car. And you know what, Scott, podcasting, actually, because of the foundation that we had and being in kind of the right place at the right time in that industry, my husband was able to leave his job of 18 years. We sold our house after much contemplation about it. The universe told us it was time. We had a flood in our living room that got us halfway out the door for 6 weeks while they fixed that. And then we decided to put our house on the market, and it sold within 2 days. And we moved to a place that we used to spend every weekend going to. It was my husband's happy place. So he was able to quit his job, and now he fixes boats. And does maintenance up on the lake. He never has to leave the lake. And we can run our podcasting business 100% virtually online. Thank God for Zoom. And, you know, platforms like StreamYard and Zoom and all these great platforms that, you know, we can still feel like we're connected and sitting down having coffee, even though you're halfway across the world from where we are right now. And thank God for my husband can now enjoy his life and not be in a corporate environment where he was miserable and commuting 3 hours a day. And our kids are thriving. You know, we moved to a place from the 8 acres, and they're on a lakefront, and they go to a school with only 70 kids, and it's a really small community. And you know, I think they're having just the quality of lifestyle that we were really after and weren't getting in the city.
Cool. And that I don't want to dive too deeply into that because we don't really have enough time. Maybe next time you come on. But that wasn't we're wandering through life and all this stuff happened and we just sort of showed up and we were there. You were intentional about all these different steps, right? And I think that is so important that, you know, we're so busy, but take the time, sit down, get a pen and paper and start writing out, like, what is your ideal life? And know that when you're in your 20s, and when you're in your 40s and when you're in your 60s and when you're in your 80s, ideal lifestyles are very different. So don't try and make it in stone and
Yes, I
fight
hope to be
changes.
traveling the world like you, Scott, when I'm when my kids are now done with school.
Right. Ricky Shetty, a mutual friend of ours, he went all around the world with a baby, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I was like, oh my goodness, had a great time and everything else. But that's not the lifestyle that I would ever want to do. I would just be freaking out, about my kids and everything else. So, but it was fine for him. So everyone is different. Everyone has different visions, different goals, but you can let life happen to you, or you can let you happen to life. And that's what I really appreciate about and love about you, Michelle, is that I've watched you for almost 15 years, and you just take these steps, and they're always intentional. This is what I want to do. And you don't have to say this is what I wanted. I can tell from what you're doing that you're doing what you want to do. And that's such a wonderful place to be in life.
Yeah, it's super amazing. We've created the lifestyle we want. And, Scott, that happened. I was sitting at a network marketing meeting one day, and I saw this screen, the American dream: go to school, get a job, get married, retire. I was like, what? That does not sound like a dream life to me. And, being Canadian, it was like, I always said, forget the Canadian dream, American dream, whatever, same thing. It's the same dream that they push on us. And that is not for me. Sorry.
So you're the creator of the Profitable Podcaster Formula.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about it?
Sure. So because we work with entrepreneurs who are podcasters, instead of creating ads and, having Patreon, people donating to your show, we really create a strategic way of getting you set up as a podcaster, but also monetizing and seeing a return on your investment back into your business and back into your pocket, rather than having to chase after sponsorship or advertising. And so we really actually teach people how to use podcasting as an amazing networking tool, as like a media ticket, as a way to really grow your business that you're growing and share your message in a bigger way. So that's the Profitable Podcaster Formula. And also with my podcastcoach.com, my partner in that is Evans Putman, and he was a partner in a real estate podcast that was making $500,000 in recurring revenue. So recurring revenue is a big part of what we teach in that program. And that podcast actually was sold for 6 figures. So it just shows you that with some simple steps and some simple ways of things that you can add within your show, and also the way you set up your show, is really going to help you kind of see a return on your investment of time and effort and money back into your pocket. And then where I specialize in more of the optimizing your podcast and managing your podcast for you. So we work with people who see the value in sticking with the content creation and letting someone else take care of all the technology and the marketing and the social media stuff. So that's what my business Amplify You focuses on. And, it's been a really great combination of those. And I think I got tired of seeing people start a show and then after 12 episodes disappear. So this has really been a more of a sustainable way for people to make sure they have the right messaging, the right positioning, and making sure that's going to see a return on their investment for their show.
Cool. We're getting close to the end of our time, Michelle, but before we move off of this topic, what's one thing that you see a lot of podcasters doing wrong? So if you had one message, all you podcasting guys and gals, stop doing this, or you should be doing this that none of you ever do.
Okay, so there's a few things. This is probably the number one that we get people really focus on, this one, and that's focusing on the download numbers. Stop focusing on the download numbers. I think of it this way: if you were to speak in front of 100 people in your living room, you'd be thrilled. You'd be excited to share your message with 100 people. So think of those 100 downloads on your show as those 100 people in your living room. So instead of focusing on the thousands and thousands and thousands of downloads on your show, focus on creating a relationship with them, creating a movement that they're excited to be a part of. Help them get involved in the creation of your show by asking them, do you like this cover or this cover? Or what do you think? What kind of topics are you interested in? And then move them into some sort of community or fan club or somewhere where you can communicate with them and find out what they want more of, and then create more content of exactly what they're looking for. And stop worrying about the numbers and start thinking about the relationships.
That is excellent advice, because most podcasters don't need 10,000 customers.
No, they don't. They think they would go out of business with most of their 10,000 customers. And also, if you think about it this way, that they actually, if you have 250 downloads per episode, you're in the top 20% of podcasts out there. And that was a statistic last year. So that number may have changed a little bit, but that number really surprised me, that that puts you in the top 20%. Just shows how many shows out there have less than 250 downloads. So,
And
it just,
is that a day or a month?
That's per show.
Per show. Oh, so the total is less than 250.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that a surprising statistic? That
is. Huh. Whew. All right. So that blew me away. Now I forgot what I was going to ask you next. What is one of your like passion projects, or one of the things you're passionate about right now outside of podcasting and your family?
Oh my gosh. Outside of podcasting and family, there's not much time to do anything else outside of podcasting and family and business. One of my big passions is on hold right now in the world is traveling. So what we're doing right now is saving up so that we can do a big family trip again. Like, we love the RV so much. I want to do something like that again, but maybe this time we'll take the kids skiing for a winter somewhere. Or do something like living on a sailboat, or do another crazy adventure. I have some more up my sleeve, so I'm sure we'll find some other adventure to do for a few months at a time. And that's kind of a cool experience, I think, is a neat way of, maybe we'll put backpacks on the kids now that they're old enough to carry their own and go somewhere. But we have to wait for the world to open up. In the meantime, we're saving up our pennies until then.
Oh, cool. You just reminded me, one of my dreams on my bucket list, we'll put it to you that way, because British Columbia is such a beautiful province, almost said state. I hope that never happens.
For so long, Scott. Jeez.
And I tend to prefer warm places, but one of my bucket lists is to go skiing for 2 or 3 days in all the, not 100% of, but like a lot of the ski resorts in British Columbia. Just go to Kamloops and Fernie and Cranbrook and up to Terrace. And I skied up in Terrace when I was living in Prince Rupert. Loved it. And it's just they're all so different. They're all so beautiful. And there's just something about the fresh snow and the air and being up in the mountains that I just love. And so you just reminded me of that, is, on my bucket.
Yeah, that's what my job was before we met. It was before I had the co-working space in the fitness studio. I was a ski and snowboard tour guide, where I was at a different mountain every weekend, taking corporations up there and having a lot of fun. So we were at all of those resorts, and so I want my kids to experience that too. So I agree with you. That's our next. I'll tell you the name of the company, because they're always looking for guides.
When I'm ready, I'll ask you, because that way it's a lot better to go and do something you love when someone's paying you to do it than to have to pay someone to go and do it.
That was my entire goal of my 20s, to get paid to have fun. I worked on cruise ships and adventure centers and all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah. And actually what I thought of before you said what you said, which I think is a great idea, was maybe I should do a ski summit.
Yeah. There you go.
And they probably don't do that, and just have all the okay, we'll do that together, because I'll get you to help me with that. Yeah, we'll do a ski summit of British Columbia, and we'll get all the ski resorts to sponsor it, and then we'll have
You're going to be hurting for guests right now,
it'll be the world's first 1 month long summit.
Yeah. Did you know that you actually, this year at Whistler, you're going to have to book the time that you go skiing at?
No.
It's going to be an interesting ski season, I think.
Yeah. You just get onto the ski ramp, and everyone looks in a different direction, and you'll be fine. But so let's talk a little bit about my podcast coach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my podcast coach is where we'd love to give free stuff. Lots of free stuff. There's a Facebook group. Evans and I are in there. We're teaching things all the time. Scott, you might find this interesting. One of the things that we found recently is that our clients' lead magnets were not converting anymore. So sending someone from a podcast to an ebook didn't work anymore. Sending them from a podcast to a video wasn't working super well. But we found this thing called private audio. And so basically what private audio is like having a podcast. And so what you're going to do is upload all your content into a private audio so that when your audience offer to them from your podcast, they can go there and ask them when they go to opt in for it, ask them, where do you want to listen to this? On Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to your podcast. And it comes up looking like a podcast. You can't share it. It's a private link. And so that is something that we're really passionate about. And if you want to know more information about that, we've got a 5-day free training on it, and it comes in the form of how a private podcast comes. And it's called mypodcastcoach.com/private.
Oops.
And then this here, we've got mypodcastcoach.com/gifts. There's 2 other gifts there too. And those ones are 7 places that you can find to get listed as a podcast guest. This is where podcasters look for guests. Those are really cool platforms like Pode, podcastguest.com, all sorts of different places. And then there's another gift in there as well from my friend Evans. And he is talking about a guide for 5 different ways of monetizing your podcast.
Awesome.
And making sure that you're getting a return on your investment in there. So that's another free training as well. So lots of great free gifts for you guys. I'm all about free gifts.
Go. So mypodcastcoach.com private talks about where you can get these how you set up these private audios.
Yeah, they're really, really cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so the point of that is that instead of then sending people to a different medium, they're already listening to audio. So now we're sending them to audio. So that's why it's really been really valuable and working really well.
It's brilliant. You're meeting people where they are, as opposed to sending them to a different modality where they would be if they were interested in that modality, but they're not because they're with you in the audio.
Yeah, making it easy for them.
Yeah, make it easy for them. That's the key. And that's what you do for your clients, right? You make it easy for them.
Yeah, we make it easy for them. They focus on the content and let us do the rest.
Awesome. Great. Well, Michelle, it's been so nice to have you on the show. I'm so glad that you're here with us. And thank you. And everybody head over to mypodcastcoach.com/gifts and get the gifts. Check it all out. Get in touch with Michelle if you're interested in taking your podcast to the next level. And that wraps up another episode of Internet Marketing Unleashed. This was actually my very first podcast. It started in 2005 and was neglected just about at a certain point every year since. But it's 15 years old, and I think, wow. And so I was doing all these podcasts for everybody, and I thought, you know what? I need to keep doing mine. And so I do the live stream and then I extract the audio. That's how it works. I love it.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. It's been so great to catch up with you. And this is amazing. I'm on a show that's been on for 15 years, you guys. That's amazing.
Thanks, Michelle. And let's keep in touch because I want to know a little bit more about this. I'm going to go and check out the private audio too. And maybe I know there's some things that I'd love to do with you. So
yes, that sounds great.
Okay.
Thanks
Everybody. Bye-bye.